3 railroad stations. I remember when Clearfield had 3 railroad stations. That is, 1 freight station and 2 passenger stations. The Pennsylvania Railroad Station building still exists on North 3rd Street near the St. Charles Cafe, but now housing a laundromat and a pharmacy. Pensy trains, both freight and passenger units, ran on the tracks up the middle of 3rd Street toward Curwensville and on to Grampian, which was the end of the line. There the tracks ended in a Y, which allowed the steam engine and the passenger cars to be turned around for the return run through Clearfield, Phillipsburg, Osceola Mills to Tyrone, where it joins the Pensy's main line east and west. The New York Central Railroad had its station along the river, about where the new Buck's Pizza building is located. The station was at the end of the line, with their tracks following the Susquehanna River downstream through Carthage and beyond. The station provided both passenger and freight services and had a freight siding nearby. The New York Central also had trains going up Clearfield and Little Clearfield creeks to haul cars to and from the coal mines. There was also some light passenger traffic from that area, service from the Clearfield station. There was also some light passenger traffic from that area serviced from the Clearfield station, as well as service to Woodland and Bigler. The Baltimore and Ohio Railroad Station was located, and the building still remains, near West Market and West 2nd Streets on West Side. The station had dual sidings to load or unload freight cars, but not passengers. The B&O tracks ended just across the bridge over the river, where it connected with the New York Central in the railroad yard. In the other direction, the B&O line went through Curwensville, up the Anderson Creek Valley, passing near Rockton to DuBois, where it connected with the main line from Buffalo to Pittsburgh. The B&O Railroad had passenger service between DuBois and Clearfield, where the trains were backhauled into the New York Central Terminal for unloading and loading. The B&O had its own passenger agency located there. Wooden sidewalks. I remember when there were still a few wooden sidewalks along the residential streets of Clearfield. They were originally built to keep people off the streets and out of the muddy ruts as automobile traffic increased. They were usually built with 2x4 stringers parallel to the street, using stakes to hold them in place. The walkway was about 3 feet wide, with 1x6 cross pieces nailed to the stringers. These cross pieces quickly weathered, rotted, and split in two, requiring repairs or replacement. Brick sidewalks were a better solution. They were built wider so people could pass easily, and bricks were local products and thus not too costly. As they aged, the cold weather and frost caused the bricks to spread and leave wide cracks in those sidewalks. I don't think high heels in the cracks was the cause, but the trend was then changed to concrete sidewalks. It was easier to shovel snow off concrete than off the uneven bricks. Years ago, R.L. Zimmerman built most of Clearfield's sidewalks while he was working. He had a steel logo imprinter manufactured with his name on it. He embedded that tool into the still soft concrete at each end of that sidewalk project. I still see some of these logos remaining after all these years. I also remember a wooden stairs or steps erected from the top of East Market Street straight up the hill to Hillsdale. Is that stairway still there? Southern cooking. I remember when my first opportunity to taste that good old-fashioned Southern cooking occurred. It was late in the year of 1943 in Atlanta, Georgia, in the Navy cafeteria at Georgia Tech. Your metal food tray was filled by lady servers as you moved down the chow line. There weren't any small signs telling you the names of the food items. You didn't need them because you could see what was being served. Desserts were at the end of the line, and I often chose the pumpkin pie. It tasted different, but I didn't know why until weeks later when somebody told me it was sweet potato pie. After that, I chose cake for my dessert. Back home, I liked cream of wheat for breakfast with milk and sugar. I wondered why the cafeteria sometimes served theirs for lunch or dinner, and why were most guys putting just butter on theirs and not milk? This cream of wheat seemed grainier than what I was used to. Oh, so this was grits. I tried it once with butter, but then no more. I love good old Southern cooking. The Reedsville Pond. I remember when I was a kid who liked winter because we could ski and ice skate. Skating on the river was somewhat hazardous because of the depth of the water under the ice if you fell in. The moving water current under the ice could also be troublesome. You had to be careful and watch for soft spots. The ice never stayed all winter because of warm periods or heavy rain, which washed the ice downstream. Then it took more cold spells to rebuild the ice thickness. There was a large pond in Reedsville, about where we built a factory for Berg Electronics. The water was not deep, and the ice never went out. Thus, the ice kept getting thicker all winter. In late spring, the pond was the only place left for skating. When the air temperature became relatively high, the ice became soft, enough so that the weight of your body caused a depression in the ice under your skates. It was difficult to skate on that soft ice because your skates had to go uphill trying to get out of the depression. It's time to put the skates away until another winter. Cadillac Convertible. I remember when I first became a licensed car driver. I had already been doing yard work for a family on West Market Street for about a year. One Saturday morning in June, the family was making plans to attend a relative's wedding. The housewife had filled 2 large vases with some of her best homegrown flowers and had the vases partially filled with cold water. Then she called me in from mowing grass and asked me to drive her 2 daughters and the 2 vases of flowers to Grandma's house about 4 blocks away. Wow! I'm going to get to drive their bright red Cadillac Convertible with the top down. The girls sat in the back seat holding the vases on their laps. We were almost there when I shifted gears and the car lurched violently, spilling the water on the girls' pretty dresses. Disaster, but the flowers were not harmed. I can understand why I was not ever asked to do yard work again. Sometimes our great expectations and sometimes our great expectations and happy anticipations turn into unexpected, terrible disasters which cannot be undone. The water will never get back into the vase. We should use these occasions to remind us that humans are normal but not perfect. Hold it. Professional wrestling. I remember when most Clearfield area people were very much aware of wrestling during the 1940s, considering the record-breaking teams of that era. This was not professional wrestling. It was scholastic and collegiate competition at its best. In February 1945, while in Atlanta, Evelyn read an ad for a professional wrestling event, so we bought tickets and attended. We were so disappointed in the performance of the wrestlers that we left after the second bout. It was quite obvious that the outcome of the match had been pre-planned and the winner had been decided before the bout started. Some years later, pro wrestling became very popular on television. My father-in-law came to our house every Wednesday evening to watch wrestling. He became a fanatic viewer. He couldn't sit still. He got upset with the ref for allowing the bad guy to scratch, bite, and hit the good guy. Watch him, he has a bottle cap in his hand. We eventually gave up trying to convince him that it was just a pre-planned show. It was better to let him enjoy and believe he was watching real competition. Playing the tuba at American Legion. I remember when I played the bass horn, sometimes called a tuba or sousaphone, in high school for 2 years and then played another 2 years in the Navy band at Georgia Tech. I was not a good musician. However, our 4 children have had a lot of musical talent. Gene, our oldest son, played a clarinet beginning in grade school through senior high. His teachers had him play a clarinet solo in almost every band or concert or orchestra concert during his high school years. At Penn State, he played in the blue band. Yes, he had musical talent. He joined the famous Post No. 6 American Legion Band here in Clearfield. He began asking me to go with him to band practice. "Dad, they have a bass horn over there, and no one plays it. We could play in the same band together." At first I resisted because I hadn't played for over 20 years. When I did go for practice, I put the tuba on my shoulder, sat down, and placed the sheet music on the music stand. When the director started the first piece, I discovered I couldn't play it. I'd forgotten the fingering for a bass horn. I was really embarrassed and just sat there with the horn on my shoulder while the band played several numbers. Then the director suggested we play a march, one which I had played many times before, John Philip Sousa's "The Stars and Stripes Forever." As the band played that march, I fingered the keys of the bass horn and was able again to make some music. It came back to me. I went with my son for practice several more times and then realized they needed someone who could play the bass horn well, not just carry it in a parade. Soft drink companies. I remember when Clearfield had 2 soft drink bottlers in town. The Coca-Cola plant was operated in a building on Reed Street across the road from the Kurtz Brothers factory. The company was owned by the Callahan family and produced other flavors of soda pop too. They also had Crown Distributing Company, a beer distributor, at the rear of their building. The M.O. Woods Bottling Company was located on West Side between West 1st and West 2nd Streets in the area beyond the current bowling alley. It was smaller than the Coke plant, but bottled all flavors of pop as well. Phillipsburg also had a soft drink company. These businesses were all displaced when more efficient bottling machinery was invented and developed, and larger bottling works were built outside of Clearfield County. Steam train whistles. I remember when, during 1947, I learned about train whistle signals. I thought, like most other people, that the railroad engineer was simply making a lot of noise to warn people that the train was approaching a railroad crossing. That's partially true, but a signal was, and still is, the Morse code for the letter Q. 2 long, 1 short, then 1 long blast. He was not just tooting his whistle. Count those blasts the next time you hear a train coming. There are other signals for other occasions, such as backing the train, etc. Well, in 1947, I was working for Ryan Brothers, who had a road construction project in Cambria County between Winburn and the small village of Elton. There was a branch line railroad pulling coal cars that passed through Elton. Some local people told me that the two engineers that operated those trains both lived in Elton. They said they could tell which engineer was running the train by the distinctive way they each blew Q on the steam whistle for the Elton crossing. Sure enough, I too could soon tell whether it was Gus or Sam approaching by hearing their special whistle-blowing signature style, even though I had never met either of them. Married under two pine trees. I remember when most teenagers did not have access to cars during World War II, either because their parents didn't own one or because of gas rationing. One of my school friends, Kenny McClimate, occasionally got a couple of extra gas stamps from working at a gas station and had access to his mother's car on some evenings. Kenny and his girlfriend, Carolyn Thompson, were taking two, or was it three, other couples for a drive in the Olathe area, including me and my high school sweetheart, Betty McClimate, who was Kenny's sister. For some now unknown reason, Caroline decided we should stop at a churchyard where she could conduct a mock wedding so that Betty and I would be married. Everyone agreed that would be fun and something different to do. We found a church, and Kenny pulled into a dirt parking area near two large pine trees just before dark. Carolyn did a great job officiating at the ceremony under the trees. We had a preacher, a bride and groom, a bridesmaid, a best man, and at least one witness. I hugged the bride and kissed her ardently before we all laughed amid the congratulations. Isn't it good that teenagers can find things to do with their extra time and also stay out of trouble? 70 years later, with one of the pine trees still standing over the now paved parking area, the church is still very active. It's Mount Zion United Methodist Church, where my son Paul is now its current pastor. Landing my airplane below sea level. I remember when, not so long ago, my son Paul and I flew our Cessna 150 airplane from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean and return. One of the highlights of the trip was landing below sea level without getting the wheels wet. This happened in Southern California near the Salton Sea at Imperial County Airport, where the runway elevation is 53 feet below sea level. In the photo, I'm standing on concrete way below sea level. Two other airports in the vicinity have runway elevations of minus 128 feet and minus 182 feet. We stayed at Imperial overnight again as we headed homeward. Very few pilots in any of the eastern states can claim that they have landed below sea level. Now tell me, where does the rainwater flow that falls on that runway that's minus 53 feet in elevation? How does it get up to the ocean at sea level? One finger handstand. I remember when, years ago, the Clearfield County Fair provided a banquet dinner every January as a thank you to the firemen who volunteered their time and effort to prepare the fairgrounds before the previous year's fair. The dinner was always excellent and was prepared by the ladies of the Trinity Methodist Church. After the dinner, there were some introductions, followed by special entertainment. One year, we saw a young man named Ken Thomas perform a handstand on the top of a ball or globe about 3 feet high. But then it really wasn't a handstand because he was supported on just one finger. Imagine that. With his feet in the air, he did a one-finger handstand, supporting his entire weight on his index finger. Later on, I came to know Ken, who was a partner in Variety Attractions, and he confided to me that under his white glove, he held a bent rod. One end of the rod went through a hole in the index finger of the glove, then into a hole in the top of the ball. Thus he was supported by his hand and not on his finger. There are tricks to all trades, right? Sailplane Contest. I remember when, just recently, I attended a sailplane contest where they decided which glider pilot will become the champion of Region 2 in the Sailplane Society of America. The event was held at Mifflin County Airport near Lewistown, PA, and managed by Carl Strydick, who was a sailplane pilot from the Port Matilda area. There were about 40 gliders participating in the 6 days of the contest. Each morning, the pilots were informed of the task for the day, which was where they would fly, showing starting points plus all the turn points for the flight. With good sailing weather, the task might be planned to last as long as 4 hours, all without an engine. 3 tow planes were utilized to pull the gliders to an altitude of 2,000 feet above the airport runway, where they could then proceed to the start point. The race began when all the gliders were circling around that starting point. Sometimes the glider loses altitude and has to land out and then be trailered back to the airport. A photo shows Carl Strydick being towed to altitude with 3 Amish farms in the background. Ironically, neither the sailplane nor the Amish farmers have gasoline engines or electricity. Why I wrote these memories. I remember when my grandchildren asked me to write down the little memories I had been telling them. At first, I didn't see any reason to write them because the kids had already heard them. Then I relented and began recording them as they came to mind. When another memory popped up into my head, I needed to make a short note of it immediately. Otherwise, that thought might be gone forever. Mental notes didn't work for me. I couldn't remember them. I forgot. Ideas are like a wet coat. I'm going to start all over.
Okay. Let me stop that. Oops. You ready? Oh, wait a minute.
Why I wrote these memories. I remember when my grandchildren asked me to write down the little memories I had been telling them. At first, I didn't see any reason to write them because the kids had already heard them. Then I relented and began recording them as they came to mind. When another memory popped into my head, I needed to make a short note of it immediately. Otherwise, that thought might be gone forever. Mental notes didn't work for me. I couldn't remember them. I forgot. Ideas are like a wet cake of soap. They'll get away from you if you are not careful. I've even stopped the car to write down a thought. Not all of my memories and thoughts have turned into stories. There is not enough info sometimes to make them interesting.
So, as a short footnote, this is Rodney's son, Paul. Besides grandchildren, we're recording this for great-great-great-great-grandchildren when Rodney and I aren't here anymore.
A fire at fire station number 1. I remember when number 1 company of the Clearfield Volunteer Fire Department stored its trucks in their station on Market Street across from the courthouse. Early on a summer evening, a fire broke out near the rear of the truck room in an adjoining area used as a kitchen. Old Mooley bellowed and the sirens screamed. The first arriving firefighters removed the trucks from the smoke-filled garage. I was a new rookie fireman on 3rd Ward's pumper truck and was told to help another fireman with a 2.5-inch hose line. We entered the front of the garage into very dense smoke and laid on our bellies where there was about a foot of clear air for breathing, but we saw nothing except the floor. As we crawled forward, my buddy began shooting water everywhere, although we could see no flames. There was a loud crash in front of us, just as a large ceiling light fixture fell to the floor when knocked loose by our water stream. When the men who fought the flames from the back of the building had conquered the fire, it was plain to see that there had been no fire, nothing but smoke in the truck room. My buddy and I had caused all the damage there.